You're listening to the back. You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as today your Indiana Hoosiers defeated UNC Greensboro by a final score of 69-58 to move to 4-0 on the season. In a game that IU jumped out to a huge lead, really had seemed to shake off some of the slow starts that they'd had early on. And in some of these other games, got out to a big lead, let UNC Greensboro back in it, built another 16-point lead toward the end of the first half, let him back in it again until eventually they were tied. And then Bryson Tucker kind of took over for a little bit, and IU ends up winning by 11. So I guess good that IU won. Certainly lots of different angles to talk about here, as the team played really well in some stretches and struggled quite a bit in others. So we'll talk about that here on today's show. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips, and we're going to break it all down for you on this edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. And let's start this show the way we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And for me, there's probably a number of Bryson Tucker sequences that we'll talk about in the second half, but there was one that I highlighted that pushed the lead back up to 10. Played good defense. Managed to draw a foul on a moving screen. I think he embellished the contact a little bit, got the call, came down the other end, hit an elbow jumper. Another mid-range play that he had been making quite a bit. Got a deflection on the defensive end. Ball gets ahead to Malik Reneau, who hits Luke Goody for the three, and that made it a 10-point game at 52-42. I think a lot of good things in that sequence. Tucker doing some good things defensively. I thought he struggled there at times, but got in the mid-range where he likes to be, and showed the deflection on defense really got things kick-started going down the other end. Goody hits the three. He'd missed another open three earlier in the game, and I know he struggled with the shot, wanted it to be better as he gets started in his IU career. But a big shot for him, and hopefully one that'll springboard him a little bit as we get into the battle for Atlantis, because he's a guy they're going to need to be able to come off the bench, make shots, do the little things. And so I thought that stretch, whereas things fell off a little bit in the first half when some of the bench players came in, there was a stretch there that was really keyed by some of the bench players in the second half. And another thing that kind of made this a little bit of an uneven game, and different conclusions you can draw from different halves. But that was my banner moment for today. And the play of Tucker, quite honestly, in the second half overall could have been a banner moment all of its own. And our banner moment today, as always, is brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel, now in their 8th season sponsoring the Assembly Call, and their 4th as the presenting sponsor for the Back Home Network. And as you know by now, I would think Home Field has the largest collection of vintage IU apparel that you will find anywhere. And since IU is their flagship school, more high-quality gear with unique IU logos from the past is always right around the corner. Recently, they re-released their famous 9 Windiana shirt, as well as some new designs celebrating Kurt Signetti and this historic IU football season, including a 10 Windiana shirt. There's no better way to celebrate what the Hoosiers are doing on the gridiron than with a fresh new Home Field Apparel shirt. I will say that I have just this week received 3 new IU shirts in the mail. Only 2 of them for me. So really trying to spread the wealth around the house. And also somewhat surprising, there were things that they make that are IU that I didn't have. But if you want to support other Bison related teams like North Dakota, I have a North Dakota sweatshirt on with the Bison on it. So you can bring back the Bison in as many ways as you want with different teams there. They also recently relaunched the Campus Classic pullovers. So those are cool. The coaches jackets, lots of great stuff. And as you look ahead for your holiday shopping, definitely one to keep in mind. They usually have a pretty good deal come Black Friday. So make sure you check that out. And I think that's you can do one-stop shopping to get as many of the gifts you need for the people that you love in your life at the holidays. So no matter what you buy from Home Field, you know that it's going to be comfortable and the colors will last. So go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23 to get 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. And I will say they posted, I think on Instagram and on Twitter, just a little like history of home field and like the importance of IU football over the course of time to the good brand, dating back to the Kick is Good shirts. So kind of a cool walk down memory lane that they had on there tonight, heading into the big game this weekend against Ohio State. But with that, it's time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. Which for right now, we may have some others join us, but for right now, it is me and the great Ryan Phillips. Ryan, what's your rant on tonight's kind of back and forth affair with UNC Greensboro?
I just want everybody to know that Andy called me the great Ryan Phillips. I want that clip pulled.
You're the
later.
Best Ryan Phillips that I know.
Thank you. I mean, that's so nice. I think that it's fair for people to be disappointed in this Indiana performance. There's certainly some good things we can take away from it. This was probably the biggest struggle they've had in the non-conference. You've seen other teams lose their non-conference games they're supposed to win earlier this year. So you're not drawing any big conclusions, especially as they're looking ahead to Atlantis, certainly. But there were some things with this performance that certainly popped out where you're just like, come on, guys. And, 17 offensive rebounds for UNC Greensboro team that was wildly outsized in this game. That has to be cleaned up. And we've seen rebounding and allowing offensive rebounds be a huge problem for this team so far. It was a problem last year for Indiana, and it's been a problem to start the season this year. That is something that they're not going to get away with against better teams. So I think that if we're going to look at a performance from the non-conference so far where we can kind of pick some things apart, this is the one to do it. They were supposed to win by, I believe, 16 in the metrics, and they won by 11. Okay, it's not that far off. But at the same time, there was a time when this was kind of dangerous. Late in the second half, midway through the second half, it was tied. And quite frankly, without the play of Bryson Tucker, a freshman who is just a walking bucket, quite frankly, I don't know if they pull this one out the way they did and feel kind of comfortable at the end. So it's certainly something worth breaking down. Mackenzie Mbako, 2 of 11 tonight. He's a guy you're relying on to score a lot of points. And so certain things have popped up tonight that need to be a focus moving forward. And part of that is just focus. I just thought they lost focus for long stretches of the game. And on both ends of the floor, the offense was stagnant for about 15 minutes of game time at one point with individual sequences that worked out well, but in general, pretty stagnant. Defensively, they were letting guys drive to the basket, get open looks, and then giving up offensive rebounds. So focus needs to be what this team, gets together over the next week as they get ready to head to that tournament. That might be I don't want to say it's season defining because the Big Ten's always season defining, but certainly a non-conference section of the season defining couple of games. They got to clean some stuff up, and we saw that tonight.
Yeah, I mean, those games are hugely important. We'll touch on that probably in the lingering question toward the end, but those games become really, really important for IU's tournament. I don't know, I'd say tournament hopes, but tournament seeding potential for sure. So we'll touch back on that. I think the place to start tonight is with Bryson Tucker, who really played a fantastic second half. In particular, thought he came in the first half, faded on a couple mid-range shots, as usual, not afraid to come in there and get shots up quickly. But really in the second half, ends up with 12 points in 16 minutes of the second half. Basically, once they put him in, they never took him out. In the second half, he ends up with 12 points, had a rebound and assist, and a steal as well in the second half. But things really for him got started. They ran that staggered double on the side, got him coming off the elbow, made a nice spin move, got an and one. I think that was right after UNC Greensboro had tied it up at 43-40. He made another shot in there. And then kind of had that sequence I mentioned in the banner moment, just really in a critical stretch there. And particularly coming off of the first half where putting in some of the bench guys really kind of took the momentum away. We'll get back to that a bit in a minute, but I just thought he really provided a spark when they needed one tonight. Galloway was struggling a bit. And I think Tucker kind of brought the spark that we had come to expect from Galloway, and really excels in the mid-range, continues to kind of show different things, and showed a maturity for a true freshman, the only one on this team that I thought was impressive in the way that he impacted the game. So Ryan, whether it was ways they got him the ball, what are you seeing from him? And this kind of really makes you think about what could he grow into over the course of the season?
Well, spoiler alert, he's getting my game ball because I think without his contributions, this is a lot tougher game. I mean, he played 16 minutes. It was the second most minutes of anybody in the second half and scored 12 points and was the leading offensive figure for Indiana, especially in that critical stretch where it was close, and he helped them lengthen that lead. What I'm seeing from him is just absolutely supreme confidence when he gets the ball in his hands inside the 3-point line. He wants to shoot. He wants to score. He wants to contribute. And you can just see it on his face. When they get him the ball, he is attacking. And I think that's kind of what we had hoped to see from Mackenzie Mbako early last year. And I think we're seeing to start the year. Tucker, I think we expected less from than Mbako, and he's giving you that confidence already. And so I just see a guy who knows he can score and is going to take the ball and score and doesn't care what you throw at him defensively. He'll defer and give the ball up, and then knowing he's going to get it back with a chance to put the ball in the basket. Now, the next step in his evolution, as they were talking about on the broadcast, is stepping out, learning how to shoot a three and being better at that. We haven't really seen the form that is so great on his mid-range is not as great on on his 3-point shots. And the only difference is the line on the floor. It's a mental thing. When you cross that line, some guys shoot differently. And so I think that is the next thing and the next step in his evolution as I go dark here. But I think that it's going to be interesting to see how that develops and see if that's something you have to wait for long-term or if he's ready to do it right now.
Yeah, I think the other thing, I mean, you're still on, Ryan, so we know they're not cutting your electricity off.
Yeah.
But I do, this is
apologies
really this is too early for AC After Dark for you to turn the lights down. And
apologies to those listening on the podcast who don't see this, but my camera keeps going dark for some reason, and we're trying to figure it out. But
anyway,
so I'm not disappearing.
Yeah, the other thing with him, I think, is some of the things on the defensive end, and what's interesting with him is they've played him a whole lot more at the 2 essentially than I would have ever anticipated coming into the season. Maybe that's and that could be a function of Gabe Cupps being out again, Ja'Kai Newton being out again, needing somebody to play there. But I think even when those guys were healthy, he was getting minutes there, which has been a surprise to me. I think what that forces him to do is to guard much smaller guys. And I think there were some struggles tonight as he was trying to cut those guys off. Certainly his length from the defensive standpoint is really helpful. So I thought he struggled at times in those areas, but there were times he really buckled down and played well. I thought communication in general defensively, not just with him, as they tried to, pass off guys and figure out how they were going to handle different coverages, was a little bit off. But I think that's the other place that he can really, start to get more consistent, if nothing else. But certainly a guy, potential for instant offense coming off the bench because he's so aggressive. As you said, there was a note I put in the first half. He got to the free throw line just because he kind of put his head down and drove when there wasn't a whole lot there, managed to get himself there and knock the free throws down. Those, I think, were his only 2 points of the first half. But that aggressiveness is key for this team, especially when things had really gotten stagnant offensively.
Yes. It's kind of like Trey Galloway last year. You knew you put him in and he would, at least with his energy and tempo, find something. And maybe it wouldn't be a basket, but maybe it would draw a foul. Maybe it would be, something along those lines that it just would get the offense moving. And with him, if everybody else is struggling, he is willing at his age, which is crazy, to take the ball and score it. He's playing at Assembly Hall and he wants the ball more than these veteran guys around him. And I think that's a great sign for his future. It's also a great sign for Indiana, like you said, that he's willing to come off the bench and provide that spark. When a lot of times you go to the bench and you're looking for someone to be like, hey, somebody do something. He's willing to do it. And I hope they keep him on the bench, quite frankly, for the rest of the season, because I think they need that depth of offense coming off the bench, which is where in Mike Woodson's tenure, they've struggled to find offense from the bench. I think he needs to stay there as a 6-man, 7th man to be the guy that can provide that spark for that second unit, because we know Mike Woodson often likes to do the 5-sub lineup. It's nice to have somebody who has, kind of the guts to go attack and be willing to take that on their own shoulders. And we haven't had that at Indiana in a while. So and I will say the other thing is when he gets the ball, you're mentioning he gets the ball and he has that energy, he has that, ability to attack and the desire to attack. And it's almost sometimes if there isn't there, it's just, I'm going to go and I'll figure it out as I go. And it's not going without a plan. It's going and seeing how the defense reacts. And I'm going to rise up here instead of there because this is where my space is. Or if he gets it with his back to the basket, he's willing to rise up and fade away over somebody because he knows he can make that shot. So it's a number of different things he has working for him. And it's the confidence in his ability not only to make the shot, but to find the shot that I think are both really important.
Yeah, so I agree with your thoughts on continuing to bring him off the bench, which I guess is probably a good segue. I think after last season, I'm sure everyone wants to talk about the lineup and when he subbed in the first half. There's a part of this, they were up, it was 21-4, 21-5 at one point, and I think 21-5 when they hit Langdon Hatton for a layup, at least based on my notes. And so it wasn't that all five guys came in, or all four guys came in at once. Tucker and Galloway came in first. Goody and Hatton came in a couple minutes later. This is a tough one for me. I think there is, this is the kind of game you've got to figure out which guys can play together. You cannot play Ballo in particular, that much further into the game. You're going to have to sub at some point. I struggle a little bit because the bench guys played fairly well in the second half. It did, though, I think, really bring the offense to a halt. I thought what changed in the first half as much as anything, it was less the bench guys being out there and more Myles Rice not being out there, particularly the way that he had played at the beginning of the game. And so he kind of stayed out there with them for a little bit. Then they put Carlisle back in, and it was Carlisle and the four bench guys. I thought that's when things really got stagnant because Galloway was struggling to create. I thought UNC Greensboro got a lot more physical during that stretch, and IU didn't respond to it all that well and gave up some of those shots. So I know everybody probably wants to kind of pile on about the bench stuff, and I do think there are questions around how to use those guys and how to mix and match the lineups. But I also thought the beginning of the second half, you have the starters in there and you didn't see a lot out of them either. Things were, I joke with you guys in the text, had kind of returned to their default setting, and it was just trying to pound the ball inside, even when plays weren't there. And maybe you make the argument that, well, you killed the momentum that you had by bringing in, four guys off the bench to play together. This is the game you got to try that. I don't think you can you certainly can't get away with that as you go to Atlantis. But what was your take on kind of what changed more so than just the personnel when those guys came into the game?
I don't know. I think it felt like, I think you're right about Rice not being on the floor is a big thing, especially because he created all of that early momentum, really. And he was the one showing out very early. And then you remove him and you have to give him rest. I mean, he played 35 minutes tonight, which quite frankly is too many. It's too much time. This early in the season, that's too much. But he played that 35 minutes. He played a lot early, scored a lot of points in the first half. You take him off the floor and you do get to a point where it does become, where's the offense come from? And even Tucker, is a freshman. So when he's, so there are going to be stretches. We just praised him for always attacking, but there are going to be stretches where he doesn't score simply because of his age and lack of experience. So I think that has something to do with it. I also think that they got up big, and it was almost like they took a big breath, and UNC Greensboro attacked. And once it sort of snowballed from there, it snowballed on defense. They were getting good looks, and they were getting rebounds and getting all of those things. And that snowballs into offense. You start questioning yourself, and you start kind of being slower and not cutting the right way and not finding there isn't that looseness you had to start the game that got you the big lead in the first place. And so I do think and then I think, you bring those guys back in and they're a little cold and it takes them a minute to integrate into the game. And so there's a lot of little things that lead to that. But also, you give a team like UNC Greensboro hope and they're going to start playing harder. They come into Assembly Hall, they're coming in to win. They're not coming in to look at the rafters and check out the banners and, play on that floor and feel good about it. They're coming to win. And when you start to give them hope and they start believing they can win, you're going to start getting a dogfight instead of burying them early like you should have done. So there's a lot of little things that led to that comeback, but I do think that subbing and let's be real. This team has to be at a point where you can rely on the bench pretty soon. There are going to be games pretty soon where they're going to have to rely on the bench. You're right. Four subs coming, on in rapid succession, not ideal, but you're going to have that during the regular season due to foul trouble, due to injuries, due to whatever it is. And you've got to be able to rely on it. This is really your last chance for a while to get them in together and see what they can do. So I think it's just the circumstances, but at the same time, maybe if a guy's hot, leave him in for a while.
Yeah, I think that to me was Rice was the holdover for a little while because he had been the hot hand. And then I think from there, really what we'd seen from Galloway, particularly over those first couple games, the creation ability that he had in those situations, like he had multiple turnovers tonight where he just got up in the air, didn't really know what he was going to do with it. Bad passes. They mentioned the one where he tried to have the kick out in the second half to Carlisle, just a bad, unforced error coming off of that. I think he is the guy that they're relying on to bring some of that creation when Rice isn't out there. And tonight, with him not doing that, it made the absence of Rice that much more glaring. And to be fair, you had bench guys getting beat for offensive rebounds. You saw the same kind of letdown at the end of the first half when the starters were back in the game. Yep. They built the lead back up to 16 points, just like it had been at 21-5. They got up, I think, 36-20, and then they give up 7 points to end the half, partly on I think it was an offensive rebound that was a kick out for a three. Goody, I guess one of the bench guys wasn't there at the end. He fouls a guy at the end, gives him a point, kind of a free point at the end by doing that. And I think that lull carried itself over into the beginning of the second half, where it seemed like the plan was, all right, we're just going to force feed the ball inside, use the height advantage, build the lead back up, and kind of get back on track from there. And when that didn't work, just kind of the momentum kept going and going. And that's really where Tucker coming back in and providing some of that spark proved to be so crucial. But again, you go into the locker room, you'd given up 7 points, and then there was just no kind of what we'd seen in some of the other games is kind of, picking that back up, hitting the reset button, going back out and really reestablishing things. And that's what didn't happen at the beginning of the second half. And that was the starters. So I think there were lulls and spots of play where a number of guys didn't do well. And I think the overarching theme for this team has been consistency of how can you be consistent. Hummel brought that up on the broadcast since he's done virtually every IU game so far. He talked about how really, the game against South Carolina was the most complete that they had played. And there were stretches tonight where they were fantastic and stretches where they just, like you said, took a breath, took a minute off. And a team that shoots a lot of threes, they hit a couple in that stretch. They can shave 6 points off a lead really quickly.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting, and you mentioned Trey, and it's worth noting that Trey tonight played 15 minutes, 3 turnovers, 2 assists. That's not the Trey Galloway you've gotten for most of this year. And so you're right. It's a guy you've been relying on. And when he has an off game, it's on other guys to step up and fill that role. And nobody really did. And I think that's why you have Myles Rice playing 35 minutes is because you needed that help. And then when you look at a guy like, another ball handler like Cannon Carlisle going 1 of 7, 1 of 5 from 3, 2 turnovers, being a -4, a -4 in 26 minutes. I mean, you don't really have that other guard stepping up to create for you. You did have Tucker come in playing some at the 2, as you said, and scoring some points, but you're not really getting a lot of creation for other people. And I think without Rice on the floor, and I think that is a big issue for the offense. And I don't think that's going to be an every game thing. Like, I don't think that's a huge red flag because I don't think Trey's going to have that many off games, but he did tonight. And you saw the result was a struggling, stagnant offense.
Yep. Totally agree. So let's before we break, just touch on Rice a little bit. Yeah, I think what you said was spot on at the beginning. He ends up with 20 points, but had 14 in the first half, and really was the absolute spark plug to get things started. And one of the things that
right from the jump, man.
Yeah,
right
and
from the jump.
Yeah, one of the things they talked to him about after the South Carolina game was kind of continuing to learn when to pick his spots with this team. We saw him defer a little bit more in those first couple games, and then against South Carolina, the competition ratcheted up, and he really stepped to the forefront in that game. I thought tonight was, particularly at the beginning of the game, his best at really trying to balance some of those things against a quote unquote lesser opponent, but also still being really assertive coming out of the gate. So just kind of talk about, I know you weren't able to be on after the South Carolina game either, and neither was I. But just kind of what you've seen from him from a growth perspective over these first, 4 real games plus the couple exhibitions.
Well, I mean, I think that you could make an argument for Mackenzie Mbaka, but Rice is the alpha dog on this team. He's the guy. And the reason why he's the guy is not because maybe he's going to score the most out of everybody or anything like that. It's just he's the point guard. And he's the guard that Indiana has been looking for a long time. I mean, this isn't just during Mike Woodson's tenure. This is going back. He is a pure scoring. He's a scoring point guard who is going to create for others and himself. And Indiana, I can't even name the last point guard, maybe Yogi Ferrell, that could do that for Indiana consistently with a maturity that you don't often see from the position in college basketball. In the first half, he had 14 points, 4 assists, and 1 turnover in 17 minutes. Hit 2 threes. He was driving. He was finishing. He's just everything you want from that position. I think that that's the realization that we've seen with him as a creator is he has gotten comfortable with the guys around him. He is willing to attack like other guys, and maybe other guys aren't as willing to do that. I think we've seen Ibaka through the first few games. I think he had a rough one tonight, but in general, he's been willing to attack too in a way we haven't seen from him. We didn't really see from him for the whole season last year. We saw it towards the end a bit, but now he's even more aggressive. But Rice is the guy who's going to have the ball in his hands. And when the guy with the ball in his hands is the straw that stirs the drink, it's a big thing for the offense. When you don't have to slow it down and rely on a post player to make everything happen and make the offense run through them, you can actually do it from the perimeter and get the post guys involved, get the wings involved, but actually have the ball moving on offense when your point guard has the ball is a huge advantage to any offense because the point guard is quick enough to switch the play, switch the floor, find open guys. If you slow everything down to a crawl to the post, which has been Indiana's thing basically in Mike Woodson's tenure, and even a couple years before that through the end of Archie Miller's time, if you slow things down through the post, it limits your options. Whereas if the point guard has the ball, the whole playbook is open. And that's Rice filling that role is what is getting Indiana moving and is what is getting them off to good starts. You hope that continues. But at the same time, you hope Rice continues to have that confidence to attack because when he attacks, it opens everything else up in the playbook.
Yeah, I just thought he really set the tone. I think he had 4 of his 6 assists in the first half, was getting other guys involved, and the ball was moving well, which I think was in contrast to when things started to, which was as soon as Jared texted us that, about the ball movement and how the offense looked, everything went to crap. But
yeah, it's all Jared's fault, guys.
Absolutely.
He'll be here in a few minutes. It's all his fault.
But I will say, and thanks to producer Eddie for putting some of Woodson's quotes in the chat. He said we had 16 assists tonight. That's awful. The way we played tonight was selfish as hell. I thought Rice was, one of the guys who really didn't fall into that as much. Had a couple nice drives, was able to snake his way through off some pick and roll scenarios and things like that. So really looking forward to the growth he had. And for as many minutes as he played, he still had quite a burst as he went down to get that lob from Bryson Tucker there toward the end. So. I guess he didn't look tired, but I think they're going to have to figure out ways, particularly in Atlantis, where you're playing 3 games in 3 days, to find some pockets to get him a little bit more rest. He's not going to be able to do that over a 3-day period. And so hopefully, like you said, it's a bounce, Galloway bounces back. What he showed tonight was not really what we've seen from him over the course of the other games. So just chalk it up to an off night and kind of move on from there. But really good stuff for Myles Rice as we get started. So coming up as we continue to break down the 69-58 victory over UNC Greensboro, we're going to point out some meaningful moments you might have missed and then go inside the numbers so we can highlight the most important statistical notes from the game. You're listening to Assembly Call. Stick with us.
What's up, y'all? It's Devontae Green giving you the green light to watch Assembly Call after every IU game. Just don't listen to their opinions about shot selection. Remember, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Go Hoosiers.
All right, and welcome back to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips, and we are breaking down IU's 69-58 win over UNC Greensboro, which moved IU to 4-0 on the season. And now it's time for today's meaningful moment that you might have missed. Meaningful moments that you might have missed. This segment is brought to you by our friends at the Hoosier Ticket Project, where they help individuals and families experience Indiana University athletic events in person for the first time through the generosity of alumni and fans. To learn more about how you can donate money or extra tickets to help create meaningful moments for other IU fans, visit HoosierTicketProject.org. Again, that's HoosierTicketProject.org. In terms of meaningful moments, I'm going to go back a little bit to the beginning of the game. I think maybe we forgot in some ways. I know we touched on Myles Rice, forgot in some ways what a good start IU got off to. And a decent amount of that was Oumar Ballo getting on the board a couple times early, scored all 4 of his points in the first half, really early on a couple hook shots, one from each side of the lane. I thought he was really impactful defensively during that stretch, altered some shots. I think he might have only blocked one, but altered some shots. But really for him, short of getting a free throw kind of in the middle, he scored I think the last 4 points of the game for IU. So really a pretty big stretch in the middle of the game where he didn't get in the scoring column, only took 5 shots, did end up with 11 rebounds, and just the 1 block in 27 minutes. Ryan, I thought similar to the team, some unevenness from him. I think this is a game where he can struggle because he's asked to do a little bit more defensively out on the floor. I thought in the first part of the game, IU's ball pressure was good enough that they could kind of funnel things to him to alter shots in the lane. As UNCG made him play out on the floor a little bit more, it was a bit more of a struggle. And I thought really in the second half when IU got back in the game, it was when they had went to only playing 1 big. Just sometimes I think when you play some of these teams from smaller conferences, it's a little bit tougher to play the 2 big guys because unless you are just hammering the ball inside to them, it's hard for you to truly take advantage of the size. Not to mention the fact that UNCG was kind of outworking IU for offensive rebounds. So just kind of an odd game from him. Like I said, kind of bookends with 4 points in the first segment of the game, last segment of the game. Did some good things defensively. What was your overall impression of him tonight, and kind of how IU was able to use him in a matchup against a team that doesn't have a lot of size?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was his best performance. He grabbed some late offensive rebounds, which was nice to see some life, but it did feel like at times he just kind of got lost in this one. And I think, I don't know. I think that I expected more offensive skill from him. Just from a development standpoint, I knew what he came in with, but I figured that there would be a jump from him with offensive skill, and haven't seen that yet. And you've got a guy in, the benefit is you have a guy with Malik Renew who oozes offensive skill, has tons of offensive skill, and then you've got Ballo who is more just a big guy. And yeah, I mean, it was a rough watch for him when they started pulling him out on the floor more and things like that. And that is not his comfort zone. And you saw him, he only played, 27 minutes. And I think the offense ran better when he was off the floor for the most part. At the end, he played a little bit better, and we've seen him finish games better than he started a bit early. But it also, he kind of clogs things up a little bit on offense sometimes because he doesn't move incredibly well, and he doesn't and he doesn't have a ton of skill. He doesn't have the skill level we've seen from IU bigs. I'll say that lately. I think he is going to be incredibly valuable in the Big Ten because of his size and his rebounding ability. I think that is going to be where his value will show. So these early season games that are more wide open and up tempo, I don't think is his fit. And I don't think that's why he was brought here. And so there's some push and pull here. And I'm curious to see how he plays in Atlantis matched up against teams with a higher skill level, and also matched up against teams that are probably going to be a lot bigger in general. And how that fits, and how teams that can match him at center is what I would say. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and if he's more comfortable in that scenario than playing against smaller players. And that's kind of what happened tonight.
Yeah, I think, and I'll kind of use this to bring in a little bit about Renew. I think those two are still trying to figure out how best to complement one another when they're on the floor together.
It's got to be awkward.
I think it came somewhat naturally for Renew and Ware last year. At least it looked that way. They made it look more natural. And I think part of that was because one was clearly more comfortable being able to step out a little bit and shoot. And now those roles have kind of reversed, where Malik is becoming the guy who needs to maybe play a little bit more on the perimeter. And I thought they just misfired at times when they were trying to get the ball to one another. I think sometimes the spacing there is a little bit tighter. But I thought plenty of other guys had trouble entering the ball into the post to one or both of those guys. So I think that was not unique to them. And I think even Ballo as a passer is a work in progress. I think we saw some things from him in some of the early games that were good, but there was a case where he had somebody open, just couldn't quite get the right angle to make the pass and some of those things. Although he did have another one where they'd gotten Tucker isolated on the real small guard for Greensboro, and he tried to get him the ball. It ends up, resulting in I think a foul on somebody there. So I tend to think a lot along the lines that you do of the games where he's going to be best is not a game like this. But also I think it's growing pains a little bit of trying to figure out how he and Renew play best together. And if they find that, like they did in this game, that the best lineup is not those two playing together. Woodson did stick with that for a stretch, but they went back to the two of them together at the end. And I think IU kind of lost a little bit again because it became really hard for them to play defensively. And so I think that's going to be, at least for the remainder of the non-conference, I think Louisville is going to put them in a bunch of those different situations, as many threes as they want to shoot. You're going to have a little bit of that same thing there. So I tend to chalk that up a little bit more to just a work in progress type scenario. But I hope that's all it is, and then we'll kind of figure things out from there. In terms of other meaningful moments, I guess I'm going to use this to talk about Mackenzie Mbako. I thought in the first half, scored 5 points pretty early on with a jumper off of a screen. Then things got a little ragged for a stretch. He kind of settled it down with a three, and those ended up being the only two shots that he made over the course of the game. 2 of 11, I think, in total for the game. Clearly his worst shooting game of the year. Did get to the free throw line 4 times and make all of those. Just 3 rebounds. Just felt like he also struggled to get into a rhythm, and I don't know that I would pin that on, again, trying to chase smaller guys around. But anything you saw from him that you thought led more to his having the worst game of the season that he's had so far?
No, I just think it was a bad game. I mean, those happen. It's early in the season, and I thought some of the guys were flat tonight, and I just thought that that's what it was for him. I thought he got out of rhythm, and I thought that just was what happened. He just never got into it, and I think that the offense being stagnant limited his opportunities. He was plus 12 on the night, which shocked the heck out of me because I thought there were times they did not look good with him on the floor. And so I think it just was, I don't know. There was just something off about him. And again, he's a sophomore, and that's just going to happen early in the season. I really do think that's the thing. I just thought some guys were off tonight, and it's a midweek game before you go to what's probably been hyped as your biggest thing of the non-conference. And I just think he was off, and that's going to happen. And that's why you have to have guys who can step up behind them. You hope by January and February that doesn't happen, but early in the season, these kind of things pop up and happen, and it's something to learn from and get better from. But just off all night. Nothing. There wasn't anything I saw specifically other than just it looked like he was off.
Yeah, what's funny is usually if he gets off and scores early, he is pretty locked in, and that's really been the recipe for him in a lot of these games so far. And he got those 5 points by, I think it was before the under 12 timeout. So he had hit those couple shots. So yeah, it just seemed kind of odd. Thought he forced some things. I think was doing less.
He did struggle in rotations defensively. He really did. And
yeah. What's interesting, that's a good segue into kind of the last meaningful moment I wanted to bring up. There were some really good moments of defense early in the game. Even very first possession, they forced a shot clock violation. Really thought they scrambled. Renew got the steal early and kind of went up for that awkward layup, but did make it. But I thought he played well. Bala was altering shots, blocked a shot, and I thought there was even a play that UNC scored on, but kind of scramble situation. Bala closes out, guy makes a tough runner, banks it in at the end of the shot clock. Like, I thought there were times when against a smaller team and the way that UNCG wanted to play, for the struggles that IU had at times with the bigs on the floor, I thought they played really well in stretches and then kind of let up. And so I don't want it to be, there were certainly some poor moments defensively in the game. I think the offensive rebounds that they let up were probably a massive part of what the overall defensive numbers look like. But I did think in stretches they were really locked in and played really well. They just couldn't sustain it for whatever reason. I know Coach talked about in our text chain, so I'll give him credit for this, that the way that they were, they were kind of screening the help. And that was allowing them to get some things in the middle and get some of those open shots. So certainly some adjustments by UNCG, but Ryan, thoughts defensively on what you saw tonight that was really at both ends of the spectrum, both pretty solid and pretty head scratching at the same time.
Just a lot of chasing defensively. And we've seen that early. And we've talked about it. This is not an easy system to run that Mike Woodson implements. And it's going to take time for them to be. I will say defensive efficiency early in the season, they're like 25th in the I mean, I know it's early. Those things have not, evened out yet, but still it hasn't been bad as far as getting hurt by it. But you do see a lot of chasing, a lot of guys recovering off of screens and help, not being there in time, stuff like that. And that's, again, the kind of stuff that will be alarming if you're seeing it in January. Now, one possession here or there is fine. That happens. Guys get lost. But consistently chasing defensively is a problem. And chasing and not being in position already, it can be a problem. And so I think that's what it was. I think they just got out of rhythm. I think they were all struggling to get what they needed to get done defensively and be in the right positions. But it looked like a team of guys that hasn't played together very much and, doesn't know where everyone's going to be, doesn't know when to help, doesn't know when to let screeners go through. And again, that's in some ways the nature of college sports these days. These guys, it's transfer portal. Guys haven't played together. Guys haven't developed together. They need to get to know each other fast. And tonight was one of the bad examples of what happens in those cases. Despite having a ton of talent and a ton of guys that know how to play basketball, they don't know how to play together yet. And that showed it for long stretches in this game. And a better team will hurt them. And luckily, they didn't really get hurt that badly tonight. But a better team will expose that. And we'll watch this film and try and recreate what happened on some of those defensive possessions.
Yeah, I think the scrambling that you brought up is a good point. I wrote that a bunch of times in my notes that, they would kind of get they're trying to switch, but then they get confused and then everybody's just kind of chasing and two guys go to the ball and those kinds of things. And so, yeah, you hope that's something that they can clean up. I think as you look ahead to some of these games, Louisville wants to shoot tons of threes and really UNC Greensboro coming into the game. I know Jared sent out a preview of that. They took more than half of their shots from three tonight, just over half their shots. They took 32 threes. And some of those were open and they missed some open shots. They did. But I think there were times when IU from an effort standpoint was putting forth effort. It was chasing. It was scrambling and trying to force them into shots. And we say all that and you look in the points per possession, at least according to the box score I'm looking at, UNC Greensboro was at 0.91. So the net result was not bad. By any stretch, you'd go into the game and see that, but you see moments where they're really, really locked in on that end, and other times where they really seem to struggle. And we have Jared Morris here with us. Welcome,
gentlemen.
A lot of people questioning whether you'd ever show up. I thought it was a real, shot across us that you get on Podcast on the Brink before you'd been on one of these. But Alex called you out on it, so I felt like it was okay.
That was not the intention. The scheduling just kind of worked out.
I know. I'm just giving you a hard time. Just giving you a hard time. All right. Well, we'll any thought? We were just finishing up thoughts on the defense. Any thoughts on that before we transition to stats here?
I don't know. I was able to focus on the early part of the game before my daughter got home.
Oh, then you think the defense was really good.
And then I had both kids. So it was 21-5. I think I texted you guys wow, the offense is really moving. This is good. So what happened after that? Because that's most of what I saw.
All right. Well,
let's just say it's your fault. We already established that on the podcast earlier. You don't have to listen back. That's the summary. It's your fault.
Okay, good.
Pretty much.
Much. All I will say is I was able to catch. I had it on in the background, so I was kind of watching, and as the lead dwindled, and obviously some things didn't happen there that you want to happen. And I think I'll say what I've always said for 13 years on this show, really on these early games, is the results are important, and I think you look at tonight, you only win by 11. On the one hand, it's a double-digit win, and that's fine. There's some good to take from that. On the other hand, it's not analytically pleasing, and I know some people roll their eyes at that, but it's a reality of college basketball. And so, there's a little plus, a little minus there. I think what you really look at are habits. And so, I think coming out, getting off to a really strong start, that was a positive. But, the mass substitution seeming to kind of kill the momentum and then struggling to get that back, that's a negative, and some of the things that we've seen in terms of the disparity in 3-point volume, some of the rebound lapses, some of the defense lapses. These are things that, that's one thing that I did hear Robbie Hummel talk about on the broadcast, where it's like, hey, UNC Greensboro may not be able to make Indiana pay for this, but a team like Louisville might be. And so I think that's where you kind of walk out of this game and it's like, hey, you got the result you needed. You would have liked it to be a little bit more. There's some good that you can take from a guy like Tucker's play and the way Myles Rice played. But I think most Indiana fans are probably feeling a little bit uneasy heading into Wednesday. And that seems like a perfectly reasonable place to be where, hey, we're 4-0, clearly much better than we were last year. All the wins by double digits. The trend is positive, but I think a lot of people are saying, let's wait and see against better competition in a big game. Is this team going to be ready? And I think there's enough to at least make you pause. And so, let's see. I think a lot of questions are going to be answered in that Louisville game, at least for where this team is right now. And I think tonight kind of gave you a little bit of the good, a little bit of the bad. So, you can kind of walk away from it feeling any way you want to. Louisville, I think, will give us the first result where it'll be a little bit more definitive. And so I'm looking forward to that cautiously.
All right, well, let's go inside the numbers, and that is brought to you by Jackson Hewitt Tax Services. If you live in Bloomington or the surrounding areas and you want your taxes done right, make sure you contact our friend and Chat Mob Hall of Famer Megan Mahaffey and her team in Bloomington, Bedford, and Martinsville by calling 812-339-3334 or visiting jacksonhewitt.com. All right, Ryan, I'll throw it to you first. What stats jump out to you from tonight's game?
Going to repeat the rebounding number because that's the biggest one for me. Indiana had 43 and UNC Greensboro had 38, but had 17 offensive boards. Again, needs to be better for Indiana. Like, that's not a question. That's not one of those, this has been a pattern. They need to be better. There was a free throw where they didn't even block out on the free throw line, and UNC Greensboro got the ball and got a new possession. You cannot give free possessions to good teams, and they gave a ton of free possessions to UNC Greensboro tonight. So that's my big one that I take away. I will say they held them to about 28% shooting from three. And then on the other end, Indiana only shot 19 threes of their own and was only 5 of 19. But they were 14 to 16 from the free throw line, which is 87.5%. So they made their free throws, made them pay for fouling, and they got into the 1-on-1 real early in the second half and didn't take as big of an advantage of it as I would have liked. They were only 6 for 8 in the second half, but they made their shots.
Yeah, the rebounding was split pretty evenly. They had 9 offensive rebounds in the first half, 8 in the second. So it wasn't like it was necessarily something that got cleaned up half one to half two. So I do think that's a question. And I know some of that can be chalked up to, long rebounds and 3-point shots, but that's not all that it was. I mean, there were plenty of times when, you get one guy to box out, but the other one doesn't. He's able to his man is able to tip it away and get it back to somebody. Just being able to really pursue the basketball, even on those long rebounds, was a challenge. And I think as something that we've seen before, and Hummel brought it up on the broadcast a lot. He goes, if you're going to play guys front line this big, you cannot get beat that badly on the offensive glass. And that should be something that you're able to handle pretty easily. As I look at it, lots of the numbers are, yeah, go ahead.
One thing I just want to add on the rebounding to cap it is it's effort. It's effort and focus. That's all it is rebound. I mean, size helps. Sometimes you get lucky bounces, all that. But in general, when you're the bigger team, it's just effort and focus. And we've said they weren't focused tonight at times. And the effort wasn't there. And UNC Greensboro outworked them. That's why they got offensive rebounds. And you're right. Sometimes long rebounds, whatever. But those tend to even out and are, usually pretty rare. It was effort and focus tonight. And that's all it was. And they need to get better at that. So sorry to cut you off, but I had to get that in.
No, that's fair.
You're not sorry.
Yeah, well, that's also true. But the other thing, and mentioned this before, some of Woodson's comments about the assist numbers. They ended up with 16 assists compared to 14 turnovers. Really thought IU did a good job forcing turnovers from UNC Greensboro early in the game. It felt like a game where a lot of IU's turnovers were trying to either forced passes where there was no place to get them, or getting up in the air, not knowing what they're going to do with it, or just kind of carelessness. It wasn't a ton of, I just thought most of them were avoidable. I guess is probably the easiest way to say it. And then just the 16 assists, as he mentioned, felt like that was kind of a sign of some selfish play there. A lot of the other numbers as you look down are pretty even. Points in the paint, IU only outscored them by 2. Bench points, IU outscored by 1. Second chance points, despite all the offensive rebounds, IU actually had outscored them in second chance points 11-10. So a lot of those kinds of numbers were really pretty even. The free throw shooting, Ryan, as you mentioned, was really solid. And so I think that continues to be at least one shooting related trend that has turned around for IU. But Jared, thoughts on any of those or other stats that stand out to you as you look it over?
Well, I mean, on the positive front, Indiana shooting 80.8% from the free throw line now, which is top 20 in the country. It has been a while since that number has been that green on the KenPom page, which is really nice to see.
Don't jinx it, Morris.
What'd you say?
I said, don't jinx it, Morris.
Well, yeah, I know. I want to go back to the 3-point shooting and frame it this way. Indiana takes 19 threes out of 60 field goal attempts, which is a 3-point rate of
basically 32-ish, probably.
Yeah, 31.6%, which is slightly higher than what we had been doing. And so we're up now to 30.4% of our 3-point field goals on the season are from 3. That's 335th in the country. I don't know if you guys saw, John Fanta wrote a nice article. He visited, an Indiana practice, wrote a nice article about Mike Woodson and the program. There were some really good anecdotes in there. One about, how when Luke Goody went into the transfer portal, Trey Galloway was the first person to reach out, which was really cool. But, the part of it that really stood out to me was there was an entire section about 3-point shooting. And Luke Goody talked about how, guarding Indiana in the past, you would go under on screens and you would just dare Indiana to shoot. And if they were going to beat you shooting, fine, we'll take it. But that was couched with, but that's going to be different this year because we have guys who can make shots. Every scrimmage, we're getting up 25, 30 of these or, whatever the number was in there per game. We've heard that from Mike Woodson. And, I think one of the issues that fans have had, with the program is sometimes feeling that there's a lot of talk and that there aren't results that back it up or there aren't habits that back it up. And so, when you look at that talk about the 3-point shooting, but now we have 4 games of evidence and the 3-point rate is slightly higher than the last 2 years and a little bit lower than Mike Woodson's first year, but not really a huge difference. But you see guys hitting free throws pretty well. Indiana shooting almost 36% from 3-point range for the season. That's in the top 100. Small sample size, but this team has some pretty good shooters. But we're not seeing the 3-pointer be as big a part of the featured offense as what you would want. And one argument that people have made, and I know it because, we were going back and forth in the Substack comments today, is, well, in a game like this, you can dominate inside. So why would you take threes? Just pound it inside. And if that were the case, I could see it. But Malik Renew goes 3 for 8 and Umar Ballo is 4 for 5. And so they didn't pound it inside. But yet they also didn't, take a lot of threes. And so it didn't burn you tonight. You still won the game by 11, but it is something that I continue to watch. I know a lot of people continue to watch because as the competition gets better, I think that's going to have to change a little bit. Is this a team that is going to just punish a matchup with a size advantage? Because Indiana didn't really do that tonight. Or are they trying to feature a little bit more shooting? They didn't really do that tonight because that's what they said. So there's kind of a disconnect between what's being said, what we're seeing, what we think the strengths are in a particular game and what's happening. And so, again, it's not a big negative. I just kind of plant a flag there that after 4 games, that is a question I have about what we're going to see moving forward. And look, this team took a little bit more threes, a few more threes against Tennessee. And so maybe against better teams, we will see that. But the early season habits have been harbingers of what we've seen throughout the season. And so given how much it was talked about, I do think it's fair to analyze it after 4 games and say it hasn't really come to fruition yet. When will that happen? Because I think in Atlantis, we're going to have to do it a little bit more. Shoot and, take and make more threes. We can make them at the same rate, but we're going to have to take some more because if we keep having this disparity in the 3-point attempt margin, better teams are going to make us pay for it. We've seen it for the last 3+ years. And so it's not to sound bells of doom. It's just to plant a flag that this is something to watch. And hopefully they make good on kind of the off-season talk because I still continue to think that the personnel is there to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I thought there was I'm thinking this is the right spot. I'm trying to look back at my notes, but it was pretty early in the game, like when things were rolling pretty good, but Carlisle took a quick one in transition. And to me, that was kind of like, okay, to your point, you're practicing what you're preaching.
I loved that shot, by the way,
that you're doing. It's a wide open shot in transition. You've got the momentum, you've got whatever, like made sense. And I thought then in the second half, particularly early, it went kind of, so it's easy to take that shot when things are rolling. I thought when things started to get tight at the beginning of the second half, they tried to just pound the ball inside. And that in one of those cases it worked. Renew ended up getting blocked or missed and got the rebound and put it back in. But in general, they made a lot of turnovers trying to get the ball inside. Part of that was poor entry passes. Part of that was guys not really having good position. But they kind of reverted back to some of that when the game really got uncomfortable. And so that's probably what worried me a little bit more than anything, is that, I think that shot early in the game and some other shots we've seen over the course of the season are ones that they may not have taken in years past. And so it kind of goes along with that theme of we want to do this more and whatever. What concerned me was, again, I'm going to say what I said before, like they returned to their default setting and tried to pass the ball inside and tried to figure it out. Now, flip side of that is you make 1 out of 9 3-pointers in the second half. You could argue, why the hell should you shoot more? We don't need to get into all that, but I did think the quality of the threes in general in the second half was not what they were in the first half. They were a little more forced, or Mbako took one at the end of the shot clock. Carlisle took kind of a questionable one. I felt like Goody hit his only one. I think Rice took one, which may also have been toward the end of the shot clock. So I think you just got worse shots. I think that probably leads a little bit to the percentage not looking as good in the second half, but definitely something to watch, and certainly is something that's going to be, no matter how many IU shoots, they're going to have to go well outside of their comfort zone to shoot as many as Louisville is going to shoot on Wednesday. But you do have to do.
Don't expect that.
Yeah, I think you're going to get more wide open scenarios where the kinds of ones that Carlisle took at the beginning of the game are going to be available to you in that game, and you got to be able to take them and make them. And that's where the one that Goody made in the second half, the one they did make, was like the kind of one that is really important for this team to take and make.
Yeah. The last thing I'll say, and I guess this is probably a little bit of a preview of game ball, but you look at the stats and you see Myles Rice with 20 points, still able to get 6 assists as well, had a few turnovers, but the sign of a good point guard is doing what the game needs you to do. And I thought Myles Rice really got Indiana off to a good start. And this was a game where he needed to score because Cannon Carlisle wasn't making his shots. Malik and Umar weren't dominating. Mackenzie Mbako had his first slow shooting night of the game. So Myles Rice had to score, and he did. And he continues to show that he has what it takes to lead this team. And that is what allows you on a night like tonight where you're struggling and it could have turned into a Florida Gulf Coast or Army game. Having a guard of Myles Rice's caliber allows you to still win that game by 11 points. And so that is the biggest difference, and it's a huge difference in this team, and why I think it's reasonable to have some excitement heading into Atlantis, because this team can do more. They've just got to, be more consistent within games. I mean, that's what we've all seen here through the first 4 games, and if they can do that and start to capture that, they're going to be able to beat some good teams.
Yep. All right, we're going to take our last break. It's what you brought up is probably a good segue, because when we come back on the assembly call, we're going to hand out our game balls and Hoosier Hustle Award as well as question, and then we'll look ahead at IU's upcoming opponent. That's all next here on the assembly call. Stick with us.
This is Nick Zeisloft. I never miss an open 3, and I never miss an episode of the Assembly Call.
And welcome back to the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. I'm Andy Bottoms here with Ryan Phillips and Jared Morris, and we are breaking down Indiana's 69-58 victory over UNC Greensboro. It is now time for our game balls, presented by our friends Allie and James at Bloom Environmental. and they want to help you protect your home's air quality. And the best way to do that is to stop water at the source. Voted the best of B-Town in basement services for 4 years running, their basement waterproofing and crawl space encapsulation is the best defense your home can have against mold growth and structural damage. Mention Assembly Call and you get 10% off of your system. Call today for a free estimate, or if you just want to hear Allie talk about Kurt Signetti for an hour. You can learn more about them at bloomenviro.com. All right, fellas, it is time for our game balls. As we come into this game, Myles Rice and Mackenzie Mbako tied for the lead with 2, and Bryson Tucker with 1. I think there's really only 2 potential choices here for the game ball this time. Ryan, since you pretty much said earlier who's getting yours, I'll go to you first so we don't build up unnecessary drama.
Yeah, I gave a spoiler alert earlier. It's Bryson Tucker, 14 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, no turnovers, and a steal in 25 minutes. But really, it was that action in the second half where he had 12 points, really sparked them when it was dead even. He sparked them to getting back to a pretty comfortable lead. And without his contributions in the second half, this is a dogfight to the end, I think. And he, played 16 minutes. I think I said I said earlier, only one player played more minutes than him in the second half, and that was Myles Rice, and 12 points, made 2 out of 3 free throws, played really well. And without his offense, again, I think this is a struggle for Indiana. So he gets it from me.
All right, Jared, what about you?
Well, I didn't get to see as much of the second half, so I'm going to defer to Ryan on the spark that Bryson Tucker had. I'm still going to give my game ball to Myles Rice, even so, just because I think that overall stat line and what I saw from him early on was huge, and Indiana getting out to a big lead that they needed, most of there to keep that lead in the second half. I do also want to give an honorable mention game ball to Galen Clavio and Taylor Lehman for their excellent Indiana-Ohio State preview on the most recent episode of Crimson Cast. Indiana-Ohio State preview. Make sure you check that out. Obviously, with the big game coming up this weekend, lots of great content on the Crimson Cast feed. I already talked about why Myles Rice. So let's give those guys a shout out. And Andy, you can break the tie.
Well, it's disappointing that they didn't spend too much time talking about whether IU should play Curtis Rourke or not in the game. That was my only real disappointment.
I mean, obviously, you got to consider sitting him, guys.
All right. Shouldn't give that any more air than it already has. Anyway, I'm going to go with Tucker. I think those were the clear 2 guys. I just thought Tucker's performance at a time the game was kind of felt like it was slipping away is important. And I think, what he did, it wasn't quite the closer that we've seen Malik Renew be in some of these other games because it happened earlier in the second half, but really thought they found him as the hot hand and kept going to him and he kept delivering to push the lead back up. So odds are I'll be talking about Rice here in a minute, but I'm going to go with Tucker just because I thought his contribution came at such a key time in the game. But don't think you can go wrong with either one. So we'll chalk that up, which makes it a 3-way tie now between Bryson Tucker, Myles Rice, and Mackenzie Mbako for the lead
fight to the end this year
in game balls. Yeah, exactly. All right, now time for the Hoosier Hustle Award, which is sponsored by our friends at Evansville Security Services.
Hi, this is Anthony Leal, reminding you to check out our friends at Evansville Security Services. Based in the hometown of IU legend Calvert Chaney, Evansville Security Services has been providing off-duty police officers to businesses and individuals since 2001. In other words, they're in the business of prevention and peace of mind. And remember, prevention cannot be measured. To learn more about how Evansville Security Services can help you preserve your peace of mind by preventing bad outcomes, visit EvansvilleSecurityServices.com. That's EvansvilleSecurityServices.com.
All right, so Hoosier Hustle Award, leaderboard heading into this one, Trey Galloway with 3, Malik Renew with 1, Kanan Carlisle with 1. I'll go first on this one since I alluded to who I was going to give it to. Anyway, I'm going to go with Myles Rice. I thought he did, really stuffed the stat sheet in a lot of ways. The 20 points to lead the team, 6 assists, led the team, 5 rebounds, did have the 3 turnovers, but played the most minutes of anybody. And I thought did a good job, as Jared mentioned, of trying to and Ryan and I talked about this earlier in the show. I think he's trying to settle in. He's settling in to figure out what this team needs from him and when. Took a backseat in those first couple games, really stepped up against South Carolina, did that again today, but didn't force things to get his own numbers. I thought, again, as guys were going to Tucker when he was hot, he was a guy trying to get him the ball quite a bit. So thought a really good stuff from Rice. And I think his hustle was exemplified there at the end of the game when he got that lob from Tucker, because he's sprinting down the side of the floor. So I thought that was great stuff from him throughout. So he gets my Hoosier Hustle Award. Ryan, we'll go to you next. Who gets yours?
Yeah, same answer. It's Myles Rice. He filled up the stat sheet, really got him going early, and I felt like his energy was there all game, even though if the offense was stagnant at times. I didn't put that on him. So I just think that, elevated energy for the whole game and really did a lot for this team. Also played 35 minutes. I mean, he was hustling all game.
All right, Jared, you?
Yeah, this is a hard one to give out without really getting to closely watch all the game. So I will caveat what I'm about to say with that. I think by default, I need to give it to Bryson Tucker, since he clearly had a huge impact in the second half that I need to go rewatch. I will say, one of the things that has really stood out to me about him that, I didn't realize, you don't get a feel for this really watching highlight videos and looking at his high school stats. But I remember noticing it in the McDonald's game and talking about it, that he just knows how to play. Like, he knows when to cut, he makes good passes. He makes good decisions. Obviously, his biggest strength is something that is going a little bit out of style in the mid-range. But for this program that features that shot, he's a great weapon to have, and he's really good at it. So, I think he's a guy that a lot of us didn't quite know what to expect, and he's far exceeded my expectations for his first 4 games as a freshman. And there will be ups and downs, but there's been more ups from him so far than what I expected. So happy to see that. And I may sound like an idiot if the hustle didn't continue after the first 10 minutes, but I thought there were several good hustle plays from Malik Renew early in the game. The steal and score, he sprinted back on defense and either got another steal or a rebound. Now, everybody was kind of hustling early, and then that clearly faded and must have continued, because I saw some of Mike Woodson's comments after the game not being very happy. So there was a lot of hustle early, and then that must have subsided, which is a frustration. So I will defer to your guys' choices, but certainly throw in a vote for Bryson Tucker, because sounds like his impact in the second half was massive.
Yeah, for sure. I think those were the two clear standouts. So depending upon who you want for which award, I think those are the kind of two clear guys for both. All right, so as we look ahead to lingering questions, probably a decent enough time to also talk about the next opponent, because to me, that's what the lingering question is what can this team accomplish in the Bahamas? These games become incredibly important for IU's tournament resume as you look ahead to March. And really, the Louisville game takes on huge importance for a few reasons. One, it's another major conference opponent to take on, and we'll touch a little bit on some of their numbers here in a second, but 2, if you win, you're likely to get a chance to play Gonzaga, which is one that can help your resume a whole lot more than being able to play West Virginia would be, assuming Gonzaga does what is expected of them and beats West Virginia. So you get yourself kind of onto the winner's side of the bracket, give yourself a chance to play some better games. I think Arizona is the big team on the other side of the bracket from IU. The other matchup, I think, is Providence, Oklahoma. Providence has been fairly disappointing so far. Oklahoma not picked to do all that well in the SEC. Weird to say that. But you would give yourself a chance to play, one of those 3 teams on the other side. So again, another major conference team. So I think winning the first game is important for a lot of reasons as you look at that. And I think to do that, you're going to need more consistent performance. And maybe the fact that the other team is a bigger name and the name on the jersey is a little bit different than UNC Greensboro allows this team to put forth that more consistent effort and not have some of the lulls that took place in the game. But as you look ahead to Louisville, they are 61st in Ken Pom. As you look at it right now, their 2 wins have come against Morehead State and Bellarmine. They do play Winthrop at home tomorrow before they head to the Bahamas. Their lone loss came to Tennessee. Also at home, they lost by 22. I think, as you look at that, as you look at the numbers, a few things stand out. One, they want to play fast. They're 45th in tempo. Could really see an up and down game, because IU came into this game ranked pretty highly there as well. Defensively, they force a lot of turnovers. They're 4th, as I look at it right now, in defensive turnover rate. We saw some careless turnovers from IU today. You can't really have that against a team that wants to turn you over and be able to get out. Louisville, on the flip side, does turn the ball over a lot themselves, so maybe some opportunities there. But while the 3-point percentage is not very good at 30%, they take 56.4% of their shots from three. They're going to, and that's while that is higher than a Pat Kelsey team would normally do, that is not completely out of character for the way some of his Charleston teams played heading into this. And so that's really what they want to do. And for IU, UNC Greensboro got some open looks in this game tonight that they were unable to knock down.
They did.
And so IU's got to be able to recover to shooters and not get sucked in too much to help, because there are guys who are ready and willing to shoot it. And you see if you go through the net, and maybe that 30% that Louisville comes into the game shooting gets a little bit higher. But you look at that, they've got a roster almost entirely of transfers, if not entirely of transfers. Somewhere Tommy Tuberville is really upset because they bought a team. I'm sure he got really well thought out thoughts on that. So a different stylistic matchup. They do have more size than what we saw against UNC Greensboro tonight. So that is definitely a difference between the two teams. But the commonality is they both like to shoot a lot of threes. IU's ability to make them take tough ones becomes really important in that game, and in a game that should be up and down. What can IU get out of the bench? How do they take care of the ball? Kind of the big keys for me as you look into that game, and one that's a really critical one for this team in the non-conference.
Yeah, I just want to say about Louisville, like this is obviously a huge matchup, Andy, and you laid out the context. When you have a non-conference schedule like this, you've got to take care of business against the good teams that you play. Winning this game opens the door to giving you the opportunity to get a resume anchoring win. It's a massive opportunity. This is a game, if you're Indiana, you have to be ready to play and you need to win. And easy to say from a podcast, I know. But here's the thing. It's really easy to make this Louisville team seem scary. And they kind of are in terms of the matchup for Indiana, because there is a very clear path to victory for Louisville. Yeah. Take your normal amount of threes and make them, Indiana's going to be in a world of trouble. But the reality also is, as you said, Andy, they're 61st in KenPom. They have these gaudy numbers of turnovers and all this stuff. A lot of that was racked up against Morehead State and Bellarmine. They played Tennessee that Indiana played in Knoxville. Indiana beat Tennessee. They lost by 22 to Tennessee at home. So you have one similar opponent. And I know it was an exhibition game for Indiana, so it's not, exactly apples to apples. But I think there's a lot of reasons to be confident. Man for man, player for player, Indiana should beat Louisville. The two biggest question marks you have going in are just the 3-point variance, which Indiana is always just kind of a prisoner to with the style that they play, and this team's history of not being ready for these moments on neutral courts and big showcase games, because Indiana hasn't played very well. But if they can overcome that and they're prepared and ready to go, there's a lot of reasons to think Indiana can beat Louisville. So, there are reasons to worry, but that, their performance, early in the season against a similar opponent shows you the difference in these two basketball teams. And so if Indiana can, this should be an easy scouting report, and maybe you have to adjust a little bit of what you're doing because you're playing an extreme opponent. As much as I've talked about 3-point shooting, I would not advocate for taking 56% of your attempts from three. That's ridiculous. Just give me like 33, 34% of your attempts from three and I'll be happy. But, Indiana may have to change a little bit of what they're doing. And they beat Louisville last year with the wizardry of a zone late in the game that Kenny Payne wasn't ready for, and so maybe you have to do a little bit of something.
Game.
Among the many things in college basketball that Kenny Payne was not ready for.
Yes, I know. So that's all
you can play zone here.
Yes. I think this is, look, there are obviously, there's a segment of the fan base. Anytime a program like Indiana comes off a season like last season, there's a segment of the fan base that supports the coach but has questions about the coach. I think this is a really big game for Mike Woodson and the coaching staff, because I think we have better players. I think we have a better team, but I think we might have to slightly adjust what we're doing to win the game. Yeah. And this is a game that you need to go win. And so I think there's certain games on the schedule that, your coach has to win for you, and so, or not win for you, but put you in a little bit of a better position to win than just going out and doing what you normally do. Yeah. And so I think a lot of us are going to be watching this game with interest. And, I'm hopeful about that because I think we've seen some differences on offense. We've seen them do some different things. So it's not to say that that's never going to happen. Again, against Louisville last year, Mike Woodson changed some things when he needed to win the game. And so I'm hoping that's what we see because this is an opportunity Indiana has to seize. And if they don't, you really put yourself behind the 8 ball. And this team is too talented to put yourself behind the 8 ball already in November. Like, let's get some positive feelings going. And this is a huge opportunity to do it.
Yep, totally agree. So that's a good segue in terms of next shows for us. That Louisville game tips at noon. Ryan will be excited about that, I'm sure. But it is a noon tip in the Bahamas, so
I will be here to host that post-game show. I will be here to host that post-game show.
Yeah, so Jared and I think Coach will be here. I know there's some availability issues for some of us, myself included, over the holiday. Thursday and Friday kind of TBD. We don't know the game times yet for those, for one. So kind of stay tuned on Twitter, Blue Sky, Substack, local billboards, whatever you
smoke signals.
You need. Yep,
yeah, I'm guessing if we do something, there'll be evening shows. Certainly on Thanksgiving. I mean, we're going to have a bunch of people over. I don't think anybody wants to pop on at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but maybe in the evening when everybody else is falling asleep.
Yeah, unless somebody wants to like pop on from their phone or something and do a quick.
Yeah, maybe something quick if it's like monumental. So
yeah, I was gonna say I don't even know when they would play if they win. So I'm sure that's out there somewhere, but we'll figure it out.
Yes.
We got it covered for Wednesday, and then we'll play it by ear from there. But with that, before we get to last call, reminder to check out our friends at Home Field Apparel. You can use the promo code HOME23 at checkout to get 15% off your first order. And with that, it is time for last call. Closing thoughts on IU 69-58 victory over UNC Greensboro. And Ryan, we'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, look, it's as Jared said when he came on, it's a double-digit win. Probably should have been by more, but they took care of business in the early games they had to take care of business in. And there's a lot to work on still. It's a work in progress 4 games into the season. We expected that. This is not a team that hit the ground running at championship level. It's going to take time. And that happens when you have a new roster and you have new pieces. You have to figure out how to fit them together. And so this next stretch, though, is incredibly important to Indiana's season. Yes, the Big Ten season will determine where they go, but these next 3 games are monumentally important. And so these next few days for Indiana, they got to get better and they got to clean up the rebounding. They got to clean up the defensive issues, and they got to make sure that they don't go through these long lulls on offense. Because again, against Louisville, Indiana, Jared's right. Indiana is a better team in every way. But if Louisville gets hot, you better be able to answer because they shoot a lot of threes. And if they start making them, and Indiana has given up a lot of open looks this year to start the season, they start hitting them, you're in trouble and you need to be able to answer. So this team needs to be ready to go. It needs to be focused, and we need to see 40 minutes from them over the next 3 games to make the most out of this opportunity that's sitting in front of them.
All right, Jared, final thoughts from you.
I think there's a lot to feel good about after these 4 games. I think probably starting now, we can stop comparing this team to last year's team because they're much different. Absolutely. And they showed us in these games how much different they are than last year's team. So I think we can kind of put to bed the fears of any kind of really bad floor. Now it's all about, okay, we see the talent. How high can this team get to its ceiling? How close can it get to its ceiling? And playing in Atlantis is a big opportunity there. But you just reflect on these 4 games. You had the bad first half against Eastern Illinois. There were obviously some ups and downs within games and some ups and downs within this game against UNC Greensboro. But you also saw what you needed to see to say that this team is better, to see that as these parts and pieces gel and get more chemistry and the defense gets more cohesive and, guys like Luke Goody start taking and making more shots. There's a lot to be excited about here. And so, as I said, that is why I'm really looking forward to this Louisville game, but I'm a little bit nervous about it, because I think it's a really big opportunity to kind of really get the momentum going. Because, these 4 wins have all been impressive in their own ways, but it's still Indiana. And, the expectations are that you should beat SIUE, Eastern Illinois, South Carolina, and UNC Greensboro. And so I think for a lot of fans, it's okay. We did what we're supposed to do. Now let's maybe go win a tournament or get to the title game of this tournament. Let's go do something that we haven't really done to show us that this is really different. I think we have the players for this season to be different. And I would like to see that next week. And I believe we've seen enough to feel like there's a legitimate reason that can happen. So let's go kick it off on the right foot on Wednesday and beat these guys and start building some real momentum for this season.
Yeah, my final thoughts go a lot along the same lines. I think you've seen in stretches of each game some really solid play. I thought even tonight there were a lot more good stretches than bad. It was just when it was ugly, it was real ugly, and the way they got beat on the glass and stretches and giving up open shots. But there were stretches where they completely dominated the game. And you could say that, yeah, they should do that against UNC Greensboro, but that's typically a pretty good program from a solid league in the SoCon. And I think there were stretches in all the other games where they've done that. The next step for this team is to figure out how to play better for longer and more consistently. I don't think anyone is expecting perfection from the opening tip to the final buzzer to be able to never make mistakes and never have a drop off in play, but they've got to work toward being more consistent. And I think when you look at the personnel, what you've seen from so many guys over the course of this is, yeah, there's depth. The level of depth is certainly different than what we've seen. And we've probably had 7 different guys scoring double figures with the way Tucker played. I think Galloway's had some of those games. The starting 5 has had good moments. So I think the talent is there, and you need that kind of depth of talent and the ability to have multiple guys step up to be able to perform well in an event like the Battle for Atlantis. And so, if you want to really take the optimistic approach and say, look, this team has enough guys who can step up if somebody's down. You had Mbako, who had been the most consistent guy they had all season. He's 2 of 11 tonight. Another guy step in and play well. So I think there's reason for optimism. I think the longer that it goes where you don't see that consistency start to ratchet up and you don't see the good stretches of play get longer and the poor ones get shorter, then you can revisit that, which I think ultimately is what Jared was alluding to as well. But 4-0, they've taken care of business. They've got themselves set up for their biggest non-conference opportunities heading down to the Bahamas. And so now it's all there for them to take advantage of as they get there. And hopefully, you see tonight, one guy has a down moment, somebody else steps up and when they need it, like Bryson Tucker did tonight, and they can take things from there. So we'll see how it goes, but looking forward to watching play. Feast Week is always exciting. I know some of the events got underway this week, and always cool when IU's a part of one of them, and they haven't been, in a number of these years. So excited to see that in a solid field and some big opportunities ahead for them. But that will do it for this edition of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. And don't forget to go to substack.assemblycall.com to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to Bob Thompson for the music you hear on the show. And special thanks to John Ringer of Rig Design for designing our logo. And thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU Hoops again with you on Wednesday afternoon. Until then.
God damn it.
Take it from me, Yogi Ferrell. Keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Here I come, Mrs. Stansoni.
I think they've gotten enough show.
There we go. Back into the rhythm.
There we go.
Fair enough. Yeah. I think we broke
right,
Coach had a good streak going of 1 hour shows. We broke it.
Smashed it.
Yeah, that's I'm sure that's my fault. Oh, real quick, for community members, we're doing a virtual happy hour tomorrow, 3:00 Eastern. The link will be in the Substack chat. So if you're a paid subscriber of our Substack, hop in there. If you're not a paid subscriber, just email it to me. I just don't want to publish the Zoom in a public place because who knows, when you publish a Zoom link in a public place, bad things can happen. So if you want to, just shoot me an email. But yeah, we'll be there. We're just going to chat about football, about basketball. I just felt bad that I haven't been on these shows and I wanted a chance to get, hang out with everybody. So we're going to do that tomorrow. And then Wednesday, we will definitely have a show, normal time, normal place, and then we'll play it by ear after that.
All right. Sounds like a plan.
Later, everybody.
All right.
Appreciate
See y'all.
Thanks, everybody. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Eddie.
Since I won't be on again. Thanks. See you guys.
See you, Eddie.